everybody, all the community service officer, myself, you have to put an article in that paper. And but the police department did say to me, would you like to do that? You think that would be something that you'd be acclimated to? Would you like to try it? No, the captain just called me in and said, Sacco, write the column. Put something in the paper. Okay. All right. So now I had, believe me, I had no, English was probably my worst subject. I went to a trade school, Boston trade school, where I learned how to connect wires. I studied electricity. I learned how to splice wires, not how to do verbs and nouns. I had no idea about any of that. Grammar. I couldn't type. I couldn't even write. I really couldn't write, you know, in the police. When I became a policeman, believe it or not, I had to believe this. But in the station house, when you had to write a report, you had to use pen and ink. And they had these, I'll never forget, they had these long pens. Wood, they looked like a chopstick. You know, they were a long piece of wood. And then they had the points called bibs. Am I dating myself? Anybody know what a bib is? A dib? Dib or a bib? What do you mean? It was a dib.
A dib's a nib, and the bib was so that you wouldn't put the ink all over yourself.
Ah, it wasn't a bib. It was that little point, that little thing. Well, anyway, that thing, they used to have a box of those. Then they had a box of that, of the wooden part. So then you had to get that bib, stick it in there. And then they had bottles of ink.
That's right.
And then with the bottles of ink, the ink. And then before you rode, you always, for some reason, you always spit on it. Everybody remember spitting on it?
Yeah, it didn't work if you didn't.
Yeah, you had to spit on it to get it to work. Yeah, you kind of had to wet it. You put the little bit thing in your mouth and you spit all over it. And then you could sit there. Then you had to write in longhand a report, whatever incident that you were involved in. It could have been an automobile accident, a murder, a stabbing, no matter what the incident that you were involved in, you had to make out in longhand, you had to write. And you had to write it with that pen and ink. Well, my handwriting was atrocious. And the sergeants and the lieutenants would look at my report, they'd scratch their head, they'd throw their hands up in the air, and they'd say, I don't know what the hell, I can't read these things. You know, I really can't. And then you had to put, if a man had, you know, you had to make sure you had to write it correctly, everything had to be spelled right. I mean, so finally, one day, one lieutenant there, he looked at one of my reports and he got so aggravated, he took me in to see the captain. And he says, Captain, he says, I cannot read this officer's report because his handwriting is terrible. I can't read it. So the captain looked at me and he said, I'll tell you what. He says, can you print? I says, yeah, I can print. He said, okay. From now on, you print the report. He says, and you'll be the only policeman in the entire city of Boston that will be allowed to print a report. So he gave me permission to print. So I used to have to print my report. But typing, I never had a typewriter. I didn't know what a typewriter was. Nothing. So now I go around to all those newspapers, and I wanted to see the way they did it, how they did it, you know. And it was really cut and dry, you know. It was a cut and dry stuff. You know, man robs woman. It was all that quick, you know. Auto accident, man, 2 people injured, went to hospital. It was all like bop, bop, beep, bop, 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 all the way down the line, and that was it. It was all like statistical information, what happened, short, sweet, and that's what they did. So I looked at it and I said, yeah, well, if they want me to write the damn thing, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do something different, just to aggravate people. So I used to like to read a newspaper. When I was a kid growing up, everybody used to like to read it. It was called Midtown Journal.
Right.
Do you remember the Midtown Journal?
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
Well, the Midtown Journal was like one of those, it was a local newspaper, it was like one of those pulp newspapers you see at the supermarket, the Star or the National Enquirer. And what this was all the local scandals. Whatever scandalous thing happened, it would be in the Midtown Journal. Whatever kind of low-down thing. Well, there was a writer that used to write a column in the Midtown Journal about those things. And his name was Izzy Ort. Izzy Ort. Remember Izzy?
Golden Nugget.
O-R-T. O-R-T. Izzy Ort. He used to own a bar down by the convent store. He used to call his bar
You know that.
Izzy Ort.
Golden Nugget.
That kind of guy.
Sounds like Las Vegas.
But Izzy Ort, he used to write an article under a, what do you call it?
Pseudonym.
A what?
Pseudonym.
I always defer to Allison. She's the real writer here.
Just call it a Bev.
She's the real writer here. Anyway, he used to write it under the synonym called I've been snooping. I-B-N snooping. That's what he used to call himself. And he used to write all that, you know, stuff about prostitutes and about who beat up who and who's having marital problems. He had all that kind of thing in his column. So I said, well, all right, if I'm going to write this thing, I'm going to write it like Izzy Ort. Izzy. So I plagiarized his writing style, more or less, you know. So I began to write the column, and with one finger, they gave me a typewriter, and at one time there, when they first started to get computers, I remember, and the captain at the time was Captain Salucci. He said, they're going to get computers. He said, would you like me to get you a computer? He didn't care because the federal government was buying all these computers. How many do you want? So I said, well, Captain, if you put a computer in the office here, I'm only going to use it as a hat rack. I'm only going to throw my coat over it because I don't know anything about a computer. You know, it'd be a waste of money to put a computer in because I don't know nothing about it. So they gave me one of these typewriters, and I learned how to use it. They showed me how to use it. I used to peck at it. You know, I had made Brazilian mistakes. I had to go back. Thank God they had that whiteout thing. You could hit a button and the thing would go drrrr, drrrr, and they used to white out all the, you know, if I misspell something, it'd go drrrr. So after a while, so it used to take me all kinds of time, you know, to write the thing. But I started to write the column, you know, for the South End who was in it. It became pretty good. And I wrote it, I used to write it for a number of years. How many years did I write it? A long time I wrote it, you know. I went through a lot of